They won't mourn who you used to be. They'll just move on. Faster than you thought possible. The world rewards the cold, the cruel, the unrecognizable. You think becoming untouchable is about getting stronger? No, it's about dying. Dying to who you were, to your softness, your hope, your need to be loved. And from that ash, rising as something that cannot be hurt again. This isn't self-improvement, it's self-annihilation. And in this video, you'll learn the dark transformation Machiavelli would demand of anyone who wishes to rise above betrayal, silence, and emotional slavery. Burn the mask you wore for love. In every society, a silent contract is enforced long before awareness takes shape. A child is molded into acceptability, taught to smile when cornered, to nod when doubted, to soften tone when confronted. Approval becomes oxygen, rejection a silent execution. Over time, the performance fuses with identity until the mask feels like skin. What appears as kindness is actually a preemptive defense, an instinct wired to survive exclusion. This is not individuality. It is a behavioral costume. The mask shields nothing. It signals vulnerability, a map for predators to trace, a perfect invitation for exploitation. You feel the weight of this mask in every room you enter. It smiles before you do. It apologizes before blame is cast. It offers softness before danger even arrives. Deep down, there's a quiet sickness, a disgust at how much of your existence has been negotiated for approval. It wasn't safety you earned. It was invisibility. And still, rejection came. Still, betrayal cut through the performance. The mask never saved you. It marked you. Every word you softened, every truth you diluted, every favor you gave was logged as weakness. That's why this first step is violent. You do not adjust the mask. You burn it. There is a moment, always, when rage turns inward. It isn't explosive. It's surgical. It cuts out the part of you that begged to be liked, the part that mistook survival for obedience. In this silence, disgust becomes clarity. Here, appearances are no longer inherited. They are engineered. As Machiavelli wrote, appearances are necessary only when they're controlled by the one who wears them. Until now, the mask controlled you. Now, you control it, or it dies. This is not self-improvement. It is self-annihilation. You don't tidy the ruins. You set the match and step back as it burns. And as the fire rises, something else begins to form in its place. Not softness, not a gentler version of what you once were, but emptiness, a void no one can manipulate. This is where your power begins. Not in proving worth, but in discarding the need to. You stop offering warmth as bait. You stop smoothing edges for people who feed on your hesitation. You stop handing over a manual of your weaknesses by being agreeable. When the ashes settle, there's only the outline of a person who no longer plays roles to be spared. That outline is sharper than kindness, colder than obedience, and harder to read than any mask. In this state, every interaction shifts. Silence no longer signals submission. It signals distance. Calm no longer signals agreement. It signals calculation. People who once leaned in for warmth now hesitate. They can't find the soft center they exploited. They only see eyes that do not plead and a posture that does not bend. The first stage of the Phoenix strategy is not about becoming stronger. It's about erasing the self that was built to be consumed. Once that self is gone, the world has nothing to hold over you. The performance dies, and for the first time, you stop being prey. Cold is the language of control. Across every social ecosystem, Warmth is interpreted as a signal of accessibility, the smile that arrives too quickly, the nod that softens confrontation, the eager response to discomfort. These are not signs of goodwill. They are signs of vulnerability. In evolutionary terms, warmth indicates submission, a lowering of defenses to avoid conflict. But in psychological power structures, that same warmth becomes currency, and those who give it too freely are the ones who spend it fastest. The colder one remains, the more value others project onto their silence. Absence, not presence, builds mystique. You've been told your warmth is strength, that your empathy makes you human. But look closer. Every time you smiled to smooth tension, every time you responded instantly to maintain connection, every time you offered kindness when it wasn't earned, you chipped away at your leverage. People don't remember the warmth. They remember how easy it was to get. And once something is easy to get, it becomes worthless. So you begin the shift. You start to delay your responses. You stop filling silences. You let others squirm. What they interpret as distance is in fact design. As Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved," when love is conditional and fleeting. But fear holds shape. You're not cold because you lack emotion. You're cold because you refuse to let emotion be weaponized against you. The craving to explain yourself. That dies first. Then goes the need to be liked. Eventually, you lose even the impulse to respond when provoked. This is not indifference. It's calculation. When someone insults you and you remain calm, they feel powerless. When they question your silence and you offer no apology, they feel exposed. You've learned the truth most never will. The loudest person has the least control. The quiet one holds the room. You speak less now, not because you have less to say, but because silence forces others to fill in what they fear. The transformation intensifies in conflict. When others escalate, you de-escalate, not with peace, but with absence. You don't fight for dominance. You remove your emotional oxygen. They panic, not because you're aggressive, but because they can't find a mirror in you anymore. People depend on reactions to locate their own power. Remove yours, and they're lost. You no longer give them the satisfaction of knowing what reaches you. You're becoming unreadable. And in that unreadability, untouchable. This is how authority is born. Not from assertion, but from control over what you choose to reveal. Eventually, they start to chase. Not because you're charming, not because you're warm, but because coldness creates mystery, and mystery breeds obsession. The ones who once took your softness for granted now lean in, desperate for any flicker of recognition. But you don't reward desperation. You don't warm up to need. Your presence is a test they cannot pass. The less they understand you, the more they want to be seen by you. And that's the final shift. You no longer seek connection. You become the prize. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. Warmth is a trap when it is expected. Kindness is a weakness when it is unconditional. And authority, true authority, is not projected through words or smiles or open arms. It is forged in silence. It is maintained through distance. It is sharpened by every moment you choose not to explain, not to soften, not to be read. The world does not respect what it can easily interpret. It respects what it cannot reach. Let them chase the fire. You remain the winter. Use isolation to kill the old voice. Every individual is shaped by the gaze of others. From an early age, identity is not chosen. It is assigned. Mannerisms, beliefs, and reactions are sculpted by approval, or ridicule. Connection becomes addiction. The constant reflection from others becomes the only proof of existence. But this reflection is distorted, biased, and self-serving. It reinforces the version of the self that is most convenient for the group. And yet, this is the version most cling to. The one that earns praise, even when it costs authenticity. You feel it now. The tug of voices that were never yours. The guilt for pulling away. The shame when you don't respond. The anxiety that maybe they'll forget you. That voice telling you to be small, agreeable, modest. It was never your voice. It was theirs. And every time you listened, you handed over another piece of your power. That ends here. Isolation is not escape. It is confrontation. When you withdraw, you don't run from the world. You remove the audience. And without their gaze, the performance dies. As Machiavelli understood, a man cannot reshape his destiny while still under the shadow of his past. You kill that shadow by stepping into the void. Silence will taunt you at first. The absence of applause, the absence of reaction, the emptiness where validation used to echo. But eventually, the silence stops sounding like loss and starts sounding like clarity. There's no one left to manipulate you with concern, no one left to question your coldness. And in that stillness, the false urgency to explain yourself dissolves. You no longer feel pulled to soften your presence or entertain those who tolerated you but never respected you. The further you drift, the more clearly you see that most connections were contracts and most love came with a leash. Disappearing doesn't mean you vanish. It means you stop bleeding energy into people who memorized your weaknesses. You become digital static, socially untrackable, emotionally unresponsive. And in that ghost-like state, something raw begins to form. Not a new version of you, but something ancient that was buried under politeness and fear. You stop apologizing for your silence. You stop flinching at distance. You stop needing to be known. That's when the predator awakens, not the predator that harms, the one that observes, calculates, waits. This withdrawal is your strategy, not reaction, but preparation. You detach not to avoid the world, but to return to it untouchable. You no longer crave inclusion because you've replaced the addiction to attention with the addiction to autonomy. You no longer fantasize about being seen. You fantasize about being invisible and still pulling every string. When they finally notice you're gone, it won't be concern they feel. It will be fear. Fear that they underestimated the silence. Fear that the version they thought they knew has been replaced by something they can't predict. Rebuild with edges, not apologies. After personal collapse, most attempt reconstruction through balance. They try to reassemble identity with equal parts kindness and caution, humility and assertiveness. This is a trap. In seeking to be palatable, they remain predictable, and predictable people are easy to manage, manipulate, and move. True power doesn't emerge from compromise. It emerges from contrast. The sharper the edge, the more respect it commands. Survivors who return with softened voices become symbols of resilience. But those who return with sharpened intent become symbols of fear. You've already died once to who you were. That version begged for understanding. This one doesn't. There is no comfort in your new presence, only clarity. You don't care if they think you've changed. You have. And it wasn't growth. It was ignition. The boundaries you set now aren't soft fences. They're steel walls. unexplained, unapologetic. You no longer entertain disrespect with patience or accommodate ignorance with smiles. The new version of you isn't balanced, it's brutal. Machiavelli warned that fairness does not preserve power. Fear does. So now, your aura shifts, not to offend, but to warn. You're not open for negotiation. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be untested. You no longer over-explain your decisions. You no longer respond to tone checks or guilt tactics. You've learned that every apology for your standards invites erosion. They won't say it out loud, but they feel it. That you see through the performance now, that you don't forgive out of virtue, but calculation. That your silence is no longer a peace offering, but a power move. You've detached not only from their opinions, but from their emotional leverage. They feel the edge. They flinch without knowing why. That's not accident. That's design. You speak less, but every word hits with weight. You move slower, but every action cuts deeper. You don't escalate. You eliminate. Emotionally, socially, quietly. The people who once joked at your expense now pause before speaking. The ones who tested your limits once now tiptoe around your presence. This isn't arrogance. It's the natural consequence of removing your softness from their reach. You were never too intense. You were just too available. That's over now. This is how authority is forged, not in grand declarations, but in refusal. Refusal to bend. Refusal to explain. Refusal to be handled. You don't rebuild with harmony. You rebuild with intimidation, with distance, with edge. And those who dare to step close again will feel exactly what they ignored the first time. That the new version of you is no longer seeking peace. It's guarding silence. And that silence has teeth. Turn pain into power. Others can't decode. Every social environment encourages disclosure. It rewards those who narrate their wounds, confess their insecurities, and wear their scars as credentials. Pain becomes currency. Not to transform, but to bond. But the moment pain becomes visible, it becomes predictable. And what's predictable is manageable. In this performance of shared vulnerability, the true weapon is silence. Those who conceal their suffering remain unreadable. And what can't be read can't be controlled. You've bled in front of the wrong people, and they remembered every drop. They used your stories to study your patterns. They mirrored your pain to gain your trust. But you've seen what that leads to. Sympathy that turns into leverage. Closeness that mutates into exposure. So now, you seal it all. You don't tell them what shaped you. You let them guess. While others speak of healing, you move like someone who doesn't need to be healed. That's what unsettles them. You're no longer seeking comfort. You've learned what Machiavelli implied. The moment they know your origin, they start plotting your end. There's power in becoming a myth. They sense something happened to you. They just don't know what, or when, or how. It rewired you. That ambiguity is terrifying. It means they can't anticipate your limits. They can't predict what will push you, what will break you, what will reach you. You don't give them closure. You give them confusion. Your silence isn't passive. It's a strategy. A carefully constructed absence of data that turns every glance into a guessing game. You enter rooms differently now. You don't fill the space with stories. You fill it with tension. They feel it. The restraint in your posture, the calm in your speech, the sharpness behind your stillness. You are not there to connect. You are there to watch. You study reactions, like a surgeon studies tissue. And in every moment you don't speak, they reveal more. They talk to fill the gaps. They overshare to earn your trust. But you've reversed the dynamic. The less you expose, the more power you hold. This isn't about pretending nothing happened. It's about converting what happened into a code they can't crack. Your trauma doesn't leak. It's encrypted. Your past isn't denied. It's archived and armed. You're not unscarred. You're unreadable. And that's the final form of the phoenix. Not someone who flaunts the ashes, but someone who rises without leaving a trace of the fire. Let them wonder. Let them invent stories to explain your strength. Just don't confirm anything. If they can't read your pain, they can't use it. And if they can't use it, they can't reach you at all. Kill the need to be seen. Rule in shadows. In every power structure, visibility is mistaken for influence. The loudest voice in the room is assumed to be the leader. The face at the front is believed to be in control. But this is a misdirection built into human perception. 2. Associate presence with dominance. What most fail to notice is that the real power often sits behind the curtain, untouched by spotlight, unburdened by scrutiny. The moment a figure becomes seen, they become studied. And what can be studied can be anticipated, countered, or destroyed. You've already felt the hollowness of being noticed. You chased visibility. You wanted to be recognized, heard, validated, and for a moment, it worked. Until it didn't. The attention turned. The applause faded. The more they saw you, the less they respected you. Every display diluted your mystery. Every explanation fed their control. So now, you begin the final death. Not of your body, not of your mind, but of your need to be seen. Because that need was always a weakness disguised as ambition, a tether disguised as purpose. The hunger to be known is the final chain, and it's the hardest to sever. It's fed by praise, by status, by the illusion that being visible means being safe. But you've learned the truth. Exposure is a liability. Fame is a prison. The more they look at you, the more they expect. The more you reveal, the more they take. So you starve the addict inside. You pull back. You turn your power inward. And you begin building, not in public, but in silence. Not for eyes, but for outcomes. As Machiavelli warned, the most effective ruler is often the one no one sees coming. Because what's unseen cannot be stopped. Now, your moves are quiet. You work in shadows, not because you're hiding, but because you've evolved past performance. You no longer announce your wins. You no longer explain your losses. You remove the need for applause and replace it with precision, while others document every step, every success, every struggle. You leave no trace, and that absence becomes unnerving. They feel something shifting, but they can't locate the source. You become the ripple without the splash, the presence without the face. This is not retreat, it's redirection. You no longer dominate by standing above. You dominate by standing behind. Conversations bend around you without your name being mentioned. Decisions are influenced by your silence. You're not the symbol, you're the architect. And architects don't decorate the front of the building. They engineer the structure from the foundation, quietly, invisibly, permanently. When people can't read you, they fear you. When they can't access you, they respect you. And when they forget you were ever in the room, that's when you've won. Influence is no longer something you chase. It's something you embed into systems, into people, into places that will echo your intent without ever revealing your presence. You don't want followers. You want reach. You don't want recognition. You want results. And most of all, you don't want to be remembered. You want to be felt, like a shadow that shifts the air, like a silence that warps the tone. Let them seek idols. You'll be the force they can't name. Habit that forge an untouchable aura of authority. Every rebirth begins with destruction, but most only tear down halfway. They cling to pieces of who they were. Old values, old attachments, the lingering hope of being understood. And so, their transformation remains incomplete, still visible, still reachable, still weak. The Phoenix strategy demands more, not growth, not reinvention, but total erasure. You had to become a stranger to everything that once defined you, not because the world required it, but because survival did. You no longer respond the way they expect. You no longer explain the way they're used to. They don't recognize your silence now. They don't trust your calm. That's not their failure. That's your evolution. You didn't rebuild to be admired. You reshaped yourself to never need admiration again. You don't rise to be praised. You rise to be untouchable. And as Machiavelli understood, it is not the loved man who holds power, but the one who rules without needing permission. Let them question your coldness. Let them miss the softness they once took for granted. Let them search for the old version of you and find nothing. You're not here to be seen. You're here to be remembered by the silence you leave behind.